One of the most important things in Destiny 2 and in pretty much any first-person shooter is your ability to turn and look around. Now, this is controlled by the setting called look sensitivity. So what would happen if you turned your look sensitivity all the way down to 0, completely removing your ability to control where you look? Would the game even be possible anymore? Well, I decided to find out by asking myself, can you beat the Witch Queen on Legendary with 0 sensitivity? Now, the rules for this challenge are actually really simple. I'm just not allowed to touch the right stick on my controller during this entire playthrough, since I can't actually turn my sensitivity all the way down to 0. And if I do happen to bump the right stick on my controller, I'm just gonna have to reset at the last checkpoint. But before I started this challenge, I had to decide on which class and equipment to use. Now, normally I would pick my Warlock for something like this, since he's been my favorite class since the dawn of Destiny. But I actually ended up choosing Void Hunter for two main reasons: invisibility, and my Hunter was the only character I haven't completed the Witch Queen campaign on yet, so I'm making progress and doing a challenge. For the rest of my preparation, I tried to gather weapons and armor that don't require accuracy, since it's kind of hard to land your shots when you can't control where you look. And also, I gathered a few weapons that probably seem really random right now, but actually end up playing a huge part in this challenge later on. And finally, I had my starting build ready to go, and yeah, I went all in for close range fighting, with a glaive, a sword, and the bombardiers, and also just some random kinetic weapon to fill that slot. After beginning the mission, I made my way into the first fight, and wow, trying to fight enemies like this was really weird. After years and years of playing this game, turning and looking around is just something you do without thinking. So honestly, one of the hardest parts about starting this challenge was trying to go against my muscle memory and not touch the right stick at all. Now, this whole opening area was relatively easy, but it helped me learn a few things about this challenge. Like, aim assist and melee tracking are absolutely insane. Like, I thought I was moving my right stick by accident, but no, that's just the power of controller aim assist right there. And while this would sometimes be a good thing, it would also end up being one of the most annoying things in this entire challenge. But I also started to realize just how good swords are going to be in this challenge, because unlike any other weapon, swords allow you to attack in the direction you're moving, and they put you in third person while you're wielding them. You're able to see more stuff around you, which is a huge deal because I'm only able to look in one direction, and on legendary mode, we don't have our radar to see when enemies are behind us. Anyways, I continued through the mission, awkwardly fighting my way through the Cabal, and they obviously weren't a fan of my close quarters fighting because they continued to smash me into the ground. But with the power of immortality, I was able to brute force my way through, and then I reached my first darkness zone, which sadly takes away my ability to abuse immortality. And after getting lost in a literal hallway, because I can't see where the heck I'm going, I began the fight, and slowly but surely sliced and diced my way through the room. And after a little while, I was finally ready to activate the elevator to move on with the mission. Except, I was facing the wrong direction, so I couldn't activate the elevator. Thankfully, I happened to leave a few enemies alive, so with the power of melee tracking, I was able to turn my Guardian around and move on with the mission. I then stumbled backward into a cannon and got blasted onto Savathun's ship, and encountered one of my greatest foes in this challenge, the Light Moths, which are really hard to deal with since they're small, flying lethal bombs, which does not mix well with me needing to fight close range and, not being able to turn. Anyways, I continued on, fighting my way through another darkness zone, which took a few tries due to some wizards, but I made it through without too much trouble. And then I went to a small jumping puzzle, which was strange due to this challenge, but wasn't too bad. Then I epically dove off a bridge and stumbled my way into a meeting with a Lightbearer Hive, which I flawlessly defeated. Anyways, I crushed its ghost and watched my Guardian seemed quite concerned that all it takes is a little bit of a squeeze to destroy a ghost. Thankfully, our enemies weren't smart enough to figure this one out. And after some more slicing and dicing, I finally made it to my first but certainly not last fight with Savathun, which starts off with taking out a few enemies and then turning around so you can fight the boss. Now, for someone playing this normally, the easiest part of this would probably be turning around, but no, not for me. Instead, I had to shove myself into an enemy and use the power of glaive melee tracking to turn around. And then I tried my normal method of chopping away at the enemy, but sadly it didn't seem to be working too well against a flying boss that throws supers at me faster than I can even recharge my dodge. So I had to change things up a bit. I decided to try out the triple shot tether for my super, and it was way better. Even though it took some time and effort to set up the direction I was looking, it was definitely worth it. So after using my super on Savathun, which almost killed her by itself, all I had to do was stay alive and land the finishing shot. But then I missed, and missed again. And then it happened. I panicked. I moved my right stick for the first and only time of this challenge. And since I broke the rules, I had no choice but to sit still and let Savathun kill me, so I could restart the fight. Thankfully, on my next attempt, I was able to get back to where I was before. And this time, I didn't break the rules and I didn't miss that final shot. So I had done it. I beat the first mission of the legendary Witch Queen campaign with 0 sensitivity. And my reward was getting launched out of Savathun's ship like a missile straight into the ground? Now, for this second mission, which was probably the easiest one to play through and is pretty much the calm before the storm, but that being said, it still wasn't easy in this challenge. And it did introduce us to something new, Deep Sight, which allows us to temporarily see and interact with objects. And Deep Sight would actually end up being one of my greatest challenges later on. But for now, I just needed to use it to get through some jumping puzzles. Now, jumping puzzles were already difficult while only looking in one direction, but now I also had a time limit. So yeah, that didn't really help out. But with the powers of Stompies and a sword, I had almost made it to the end, and I was feeling like things were going really great. And this random knight must have known how smoothly it was going, because he decided to make me do it again by killing me and sending me all the way back to the start of the jumping puzzle, which I wasn't too thrilled about. But after another 10-ish minutes of stumbling my way across the jumping puzzles, I made it through. And now I just had to fight through a couple darkness zones, which were pretty hard at the time, but honestly nothing compared to what was coming in the next missions. So after a few attempts, my normal invisibility, slicing and dicing method got me through the fight. So I spared my way over to the Friendly Hive Ghost and his partner and completed the second mission. Now this mission is where the difficulty really starts to pick up, and it didn't waste any time doing so, because at the very beginning of the mission I was instantly bullied by a Hive Guardian and his friend the Shrieker. Now, the Hive Guardian wasn't anything special to fight, and after a little bit of help from my ghost, I was able to take care of it. But the Shrieker, well, they just sit there floating in the sky. So all you'd have to do is look up and shoot it. So yeah, they're kind of a problem for me in this challenge. But thankfully, this one wasn't too high up, so with the power of double jump, I was able to level out the playing field and take him out. Now, this whole mission was full of tough fights and new enemies, but I was able to handle it all pretty well with the same strategies as before. But things started to get really interesting when I encountered what I like to call the aim assist crystals. Now, normally you may never notice this about these crystals, but they have absolutely insane amounts of aim assist. Like, it actually just looks like I'm turning normally to shoot these things. And at first I thought these wouldn't really be a problem and maybe even be good for easily controlling where I look. But oh, how naive I was, because I hadn't yet seen the full power of these aim assist crystals. Anyways, I moved into one of the final fights of this mission, and this encounter had 3 rooms, each with a crystal that was protected by a different kind of enemy in that room. One with snipers, one with melee fighters, and one with screebs, which explode, which is kind of the ultimate counter to my close range fighting. So after several attempts in this room and being blown up, I needed a different approach. Instead of just trying to kill the screebs, I baited them over to me one by one, and then as soon as I heard them get close, I would just jump over them and let them explode, so I'll be able to barely survive the explosion. And with this technique, I was actually able to finally get through this room and destroy the crystal. Also, can we just take a second to acknowledge how goofy the aim assist works with these crystals? I mean, look at me trying to shoot this thing. It's like literally pushing me away from it. Now, the next 2 rooms weren't too difficult, and I was able to just very slowly work my way through them. And honestly, one of the hardest parts about this encounter was just trying to navigate my way through the dark rooms. Also, at one point, a bunch of Shriekers randomly spawned.
No darkness energy, only Shriekers.
Which I didn't even know could happen in this fight. but thankfully I was able to just sneak past them and finish off the rest of the encounter to move on to the final boss. Now, this boss was really hard for this challenge, since when you get into the damage phase, after shattering several aim assist crystals in a similar fashion to the previous encounter, the boss would literally just non-stop chase you around and almost kill you in one attack. And it is really hard to avoid the boss when I can't even see where it's going, and I can't see where the heck I'm going either. So after many failed attempts, I was finally able to get somewhere. And in the second damage phase, I literally just stayed invisible the entire time pretty much, and just let the bombardiers slowly chip away at his health. And after getting past that, I became completely terrified, because this was by far the furthest I'd made it, and I was desperate to get through it at this point. So I just played extremely slowly, and also at one point I spent like 3 minutes just trying to shoot an aim assist crystal. This was truly one of the strangest moments I've had in Destiny. Anyways, I finally got to the third damage phase, and I just nuked him. And after that, I had finished the third mission. So, mission 4 was, difficult. But unlike the upcoming missions, this one didn't require any weird tricks to get past different mechanics. So all I had to do was kill enemies. And it was going great for the first few minutes, and then I ran into a couple of tanks in a darkness zone. And yeah, having only close range weapons trying to fight 2 tanks wasn't going to get me past this zone, so I had an idea. Screw using a primary weapon, I mean, like, I've literally only gotten like 2 kills with it, so I decided to swap to the ultimate easy mode weapon, Witherhoard. And it was a huge help, although it still wasn't easy. But after a little bit, I started to get the hang of using distance and jumping to hit my enemies with the grenade launcher. And after taking out the first tank, I was slowly fighting my way through the second tank. And then I randomly acquired courage, so I pushed up trying to speed through this, and at this moment I realized this wasn't courage I had acquired, it was stupidity. So yeah, no more trying to speed things up for me. Slow and steady wins the race, especially when you're the only one in the race. And after a little while longer of me lobbing Witherhoard at the tank, I was finally able to make it through that part. So I was stumbling and fighting my way through the pyramid ship, and then I started making my way through the pyramid ship again, and after a little while I made it to the first boss. And oh boy, this is one heck of a fight, because there was a lot of Cabal in a pretty small area, and a lot of stuff could pretty much one-hit me, so after many attempts I had pretty much mastered the art of staying invisible constantly while killing enemies with bombardiers, the invisibility dive, and finishers. And even with this strategy, it was really easy to die. Like, one of my best attempts, I had almost made it to the final damage phase, but then I used a finisher on an enemy that explodes when it dies, and that wasn't even the problem. The problem was that explosion killed another enemy, which then exploded when it died, which is what ended up killing me. And at this point, I kinda gave up for the day. And when I had come back to get my revenge, I realized I was making this fight so much harder than it needed to be, because I was doing as much damage to the boss as fast as possible to try to get through a damage phase, which is gonna make all of the enemies spawn in at once instead of just small waves of enemies. And you know, you'd think I would have learned my lesson by now, but nope. So after switching to slowly chipping away at the boss's health, I was able to defeat them after only a few more tries. After getting to the final boss fight of this mission, I was worried about how hard it was going to be, but it actually wasn't that bad. I think I had started to get a lot more used to not turning while fighting. Also, this room was a lot bigger, so I just had a ton of area to move around, which is really helpful when you can't turn. And finally, I just took things really slowly from the start. So just after a few tries, I was able to get through this fight and finish mission 4. Now, this mission was actually really easy when it came to fighting. The hard part of this one was just trying to find where the heck I needed to go, because there was a ton of small deep sight puzzles which lead to these darkness thingies that I need to destroy. Now, I have done this campaign before, but it's been like half a year. Also, I can't see the majority of my surroundings, so yeah, there was a lot of me just jumping into walls and just getting very confused. But after lots of trial and error, I made it to the final boss of this mission. And oh man, he was one heck of a pushover. Well, compared to the last mission's bosses, and the ones yet to come. But the real challenge was after defeating the boss, when I was faced up against a deep sight puzzle. And this one was harder than all of the others before it. It required me to look at a symbol from a certain position. Something so simple and so easy normally, but as soon as you remove one controller, it becomes 1,000 times harder. And I had no enemies left, which means I couldn't use aim assist to turn. So there was only one option left. So you can actually turn left, right, up, and down by just shooting your gun. Well, a lot of shooting your gun, and with certain weapons. So every weapon has a recoil direction stat, and this stat determines if your gun will kick to the left or the right, or a little bit of both. And the higher the stat is, the less it kicks to either side. So I found a couple of different weapons with a really low recoil direction, one that would kick mostly to the left and one that would kick mostly to the right. And with these weapons, I was able to turn to the left and the right. Now for looking up and down, well, pretty much every weapon will kick up when shooting it, and a lot of them will correct themselves and come back down to where you started shooting. But if you have a weapon that kicks up a lot, it'll eventually make you look straight up. But since you can't look any higher than that, if you keep on shooting at this point, it will actually overcorrect itself when it comes back down, making you look down more than you were before. Now, looking up is much more simple. Some weapons just don't correct themselves all the way, like my glaive actually does this. So after every shot, you'll just look up a little bit more. Okay, I hope that kind of made sense. Anyways, after shooting for a few minutes, I was able to look in the right direction and finished mission 5. And it actually rewarded me with a nice little holographic reenactment. But I couldn't see it properly because of this stupid freaking challenge. This strike made me do things I thought I'd never have to do in this challenge. Like, sit back, relax, and let some random blueberries do all the work. I mean, I tried to help. Anyways, thanks to these two guardians for getting me through this. It was a nice break before things got really hard. Oh yeah, and this happened. So, deep sight puzzles have been slowly evolving with each mission, trying to get me to fail this challenge. And now it has reached its final form. And it was something so powerful, I went into this mission seriously thinking this might be the end, but I wasn't gonna go down without a fight. Now, my first encounter with these hive seals wasn't too bad, but it did confirm one of my fears. You can only break them by shooting them. And then these puzzles escalated freaking quickly, because next thing I knew, they were just scattered all over the place. So the first thing I had to do was just to find out where the heck they all were, and after a couple minutes of looking around, I was able to find all but one. So I decided to stand still and think about it. I swear I definitely didn't have to look it up online. And then after figuring out where they all were, I used my specialty weapons for turning and positioned myself where I could just barely shoot them all without having to turn. But since it has a time limit, it still took me a lot of tries till I was barely able to complete this puzzle. Anyways, I continued on with the mission, and a lot of the fights at the start of this mission were really nothing special. But there was more of these stupid deep sight puzzles, and I continued to just barely be able to complete them. And then I came across the final boss of the deep sight puzzles. It took me many tries, but after getting in the perfect position and shoved myself into one of these things, breaking it in such a way that really didn't make sense, but you know, who cares, because it means I wasn't going to be defeated by these stupid puzzles today. And everything else that led up to this boss fight was pretty easy and went really smoothly. And then even though this boss fight actually took less time than some of those deep sight puzzles from earlier, it still took me a couple of tries because this boss must have heard of what kind of challenge I was doing, because he just ran and hid behind me and then completely shredded me all of a sudden. But don't worry, I got my revenge. And then there sadly was some more deep sight puzzles. Thankfully, at least these ones were pretty easy, but just took me some time to actually position myself. But then another boss decided to show up to have some fun. So I did the only logical thing. I jumped into its mouth and reset the fight so I could actually be facing the right direction. And then after trying a few different strategies that failed to work against this boss's small damage opening, I actually decided to switch to a precision weapon, which would normally be a horrible decision in this challenge. But since this boss didn't move and it only had a small opening for damage, it actually worked really well. And after a lot of jumping through the air and barely being able to hit the boss, I took it out. And then it was time to get the heck out of there because a countdown showed up on my screen. And I don't know what was gonna happen when the countdown hit 0, but it probably wasn't good. So I quickly scooted my way on out of there and finished mission 6. Now, if I'm being completely honest, this mission wasn't anything special. Now, it was really hard, but it isn't the hardest. And with the next mission being the grand finale of this campaign, this one just doesn't really compare. And it didn't really have anything new and interesting. Well, I guess it did have these hive swords, but I mean, they're not too much different from the sword I've been using this entire time, except it can destroy some hive junk, but yeah, it just wasn't that interesting. But I do want to say that this challenge was surprisingly a lot of fun. And it might seem like this kind of challenge would just be annoying and frustrating to play through, but I don't know, there's just something entertaining and fun about having a very different kind of difficulty on a game that I've been playing for years. But maybe I'm just crazy. Oh yeah, and I've never really played Void Hunter before, and this really opened my eyes to just how insane this subclass is, especially in solo PvE content. Even though I was actually wanting to use my Warlock for this challenge, but I'm really glad I went with this build instead because it's honestly kinda carried me through a lot of this. And oh, would you look at that, I'm already about to finish the boss fight of this mission. And well, this boss was pretty much just a stronger Lightbearer Hive wizard, so it really wasn't anything too different from stuff I've already fought. And after taking out this boss, I was treated to a few really amazing cutscenes. And even though this is my third time seeing these cutscenes, I still enjoyed the heck out of the storytelling in them. Although this part with the worm doing whatever this is kinda confused me, I still enjoyed it. Anyways, there was also this puzzle room which I needed to shoot these patterns that stood out from the rest of these other patterns which were scattered all around the room. But thankfully I could hit them with my sword. So instead of taking forever by shooting to turn around to see the patterns that were behind me, I just did a heck of a lot of guessing with the sword to complete the puzzle. And with that, it was time to begin the final mission. So shortly after starting this mission, I was faced with the hardest encounter yet for this challenge. And while this fight would take me many tries and really tested me, it was also one of the coolest encounters of this campaign. So after taking out a few enemies and jumping through a portal, I was reintroduced with the Amesis crystals, which I was actually able to learn a little bit more about this time around. Like, I could just use my sword to cancel the tracking on the crystal, so I could actually control where I look a lot easier. Also, I realized that I can just break the crystals with the Bombardier's explosion, and if you might remember, I actually did this once in the third mission, but it just straight up never registered in my mind at the time, so yeah. Anyway, there was also a few shriekers around, which were way higher than I could just jump up to, and it would have been really hard to just try to ignore these ones. So after some more attempts, I was actually able to use the Amesis crystal to aim in the perfect direction so I could just witherhoard the shriekers. So the Amesis crystals that I once thought of as an enemy ended up actually being an ally. A really weird ally. And after destroying the crystals on this stage of the fight, I needed to search for the correct portal to go through, but since I needed to see the symbols above the portal, it took some trial and error with the ones that were behind me. And after eventually finding the correct one, I grabbed the shiny orb and stealthily dunked it into its place, which meant I was halfway done with this encounter. So I began the next section, which was pretty much the same thing, just a different layout. And I was starting to have high hopes for this attempt because how well it was going. But while I was trying to position myself to kill a wizard, I couldn't see where I was going and I slipped off the edge. And all I had to do was just double jump to save my fragile body from shattering on impact. But you see, I normally look down in this situation to time my jump. But as I was trying to do so, I remembered I couldn't. And by the time my brain finally registered to just double jump, I had already splattered on the floor. But after a break and a few more tries, I dunked the second orb and began fighting the boss of this encounter. Which really wasn't too strong, but regardless, I still fought it like it was the most powerful being in Destiny history. Because even though this encounter was cool, I wasn't about to do it all over again. And after finally getting past that encounter, I was on my way to the final boss, and I was literally just running straight into enemies and dying for no reason, except it just felt really good to have my immortality back. Even if it was only for a short time, it was nice. So I had finally begun the first part of fighting with Savathun, and it started off not too bad, just a lot of me jumping around trying to actually land my shots. But then things quickly escalated after I got Savathun's health down pretty low. 3 Hive Guardians showed up and they weren't too bad one-on-one, but while fighting 2 of them, I made a risky play to try to finish one of them off. But I mean, I was invisible, so I thought I'd be fine. But this wizard just didn't really care about my invisibility and blasted me away anyway. So after getting back to where I was, I took it really slow, and I did a lot of waiting for my abilities. And it's times like these where I wonder what's wrong with my Guardian. Like, everyone else with the light is throwing supers and abilities like every 5 seconds. Like, even Ikora Rey used 2 supers in a row at the start of this mission. But no, not me. I gotta wait like 7 minutes for a super. But even with my lack of abilities, I was able to take out these Hive Guardians, and then Savathun must have realized that I only had close range weapons, so she backed the heck up. But I still happened to have my super, so I was able to take Savathun down. But then Savathun's Hive Ghost revived her, and I gotta say, I now understand how my enemies feel when I just keep on reviving after they've killed me several times. Anyways, a whole bunch of Savathuns actually showed up, and since this wasn't a darkness zone, I just lost all sense of caution and absolutely brute forced my way through this part. And after going to a different dimension and killing some defenseless wizards, there was even more Savathuns that I had to fight. And after that, I began the real final battle with Savathun. Now, for this fight with Savathun, you start off with actually a damage phase, so I kind of just threw as much as I possibly could at Savathun before the time ran out, and sometimes it didn't go very well. But since it was just right at the start, it wasn't a big deal. And I quickly realized that a sword just wasn't going to be useful for boss damage in this fight at all. So I decided to go with a rocket launcher with tracking, because I already struggled to hit stuff in this challenge, and Savathun's wiggling around just really makes it a lot harder. Anyways, after I got a decent start, I went and took out 2 of the 3 wizards around Savathun. Now, since each wizard you kill allows you to do more damage to Savathun, you would normally kill all 3 of them to do as much damage as possible. But with that, you also activate a timer for the damage phase. And since like half of my shots would miss, I was just gonna play it nice and slow, being very careful. And this was going great until I shot a rocket that went right in between Savathun's legs and then hit the 3rd frickin' wizard, which then activated the timer for the damage phase. So I struggled to quickly do some damage and I almost got killed in the process. So I then had to kill 2 of the wizards again. Thankfully I was able to take them out and get back to slowly taking down Savathun. But there was another issue. I was about to run out of ammo since I'm using 2 special weapons. Now, I could either start the next damage phase to kill more enemies for ammo, which is a pretty risky move, especially with how far I've made it. Or I could try to switch to a primary weapon and just spend forever slowly chipping away at Savathun, which is gonna give me lots more opportunities to slip up and get killed. So things weren't looking great. Oh wait, never mind, I guess the game just feels bad for you when you run out of ammo and just gives you some more. Well, I guess that's nice. And it's not like it gives me a lot and it's pretty slow, but I mean it's a heck of a lot better than the other options, so I just went with it. And with this strategy, I slowly and very uneventfully finished off Savathun. So this was it. I had completed the Witch Queen with no sensitivity. Now I just want to say that this was one heck of a journey to do this. Everything from the challenge itself to learning how to edit all of it. So truly, thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you enjoyed or got some kind of entertainment out of it. and I actually really enjoyed doing this myself, so I will hopefully be doing more and better videos like this in the future. So if you're at all interested in seeing those, well, I think you know what to do. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you again.